Hold your breath. Make a wish. Count to 3. Come with me, and you'll be in a world of pure imagination. Take a look, and you'll see into your imagination.
Hearing loss is the leading birth defect in the world. 3 out of every 1,000 babies are born with hearing loss, which accounts for approximately 150 babies a year in Oklahoma. Mandated newborn hearing screenings and vigilant follow-up allow infants to receive the earliest intervention possible.
The children of involved parents hear a minimum of 1 million words a month. 1 million words. And if we can get them diagnosed before 6 months and get their hearing aids on them before they're 6 months, they're going to get as many words as possible. By the time a child reaches 33 to 36 months of age, it's been their prime language learning time. They've heard approximately 33 million words.
A landmark study during the 80s by psychologists Betty Hart and Todd Risley showed a child's socioeconomic status accounts for language discrepancies due to the amount of exposure to vocabulary. Between the ages of birth to 3, a magical language window is open. These amazing 3 years will set the stage for future academic and social success, with the gap widening exponentially each year. Intervention to date has not been able to successfully capture and replace what happens during those critical first 3 years in terms of language. Although progress can be made, the potential is compromised.
Early intervention is just like walking around without good vision. You really don't know what you're missing until you get the glasses on. And it's the same way with kids with hearing loss. As if you have a kid with hearing loss, they may get by, but they're really missing a large scope of the world that just isn't available to them.
Children with hearing loss from all backgrounds will miss important exposure to language if we don't find them, and early. If an infant is identified with a hearing loss at birth, the goal is to provide amplification and early intervention before 6 months of age. In Oklahoma, our goal is to get hearing aids on them within the first 2 weeks of life.
Without hearing aids, the child doesn't have access to the sounds that they need to develop speech and language and interact with the world around them. It is imperative. It's not a question of whether we do it or if we do it.
But it's not that simple. Not all hearing loss happens at birth.
Well, they can get hearing loss from fluid, which can be still behind the eardrum and sometimes need to be followed or sometimes even drained to confirm that the fluid is not causing the hearing loss. Genetics, congenital deformities that they've been born with in the ear. Those would be meningitis, other infections after birth, or even while in the womb. Those would be the things at the top of my list.
A lot of different processes that can be anatomical too, as far as syndrome types of things that will come out later on.
You can have some medications that cause damage to the ear. It's called ototoxic medications. So aminoglycosides are one of those medications. Other ones can do that as well, but that's the biggest offender. Kids with a severe infection can have that cause damage to the ear, and that wouldn't show up until afterwards.
It's estimated that 2 to 3% of all children 18 and younger experience hearing loss, whether temporary from middle ear infections or permanent because it was acquired after birth. These kids are harder to find. With what we know about language development, it is difficult to believe that many insurance companies don't consider the ear as part of the body and deny the very thing that can give the sense of hearing back. 8 years ago, legislation was passed in Oklahoma requiring private insurance to purchase hearing aids for children 18 and younger. However, many families find themselves in a financial crisis when they find out their insurance doesn't have to abide by state mandates and hearing aids are not covered.
So let's say you're working for a small business and you go out to your local insurance company and you buy a policy. That policy is going to be regulated by the state, first and foremost, in terms of benefits. So things like hearing aids that are available for our children, which is a state law, those insurance companies offering coverage have to provide that benefit. But let's say you're working for a large employer, and that employer says, you know, I'm big enough, I'm going to assume my own risk. I'm going to be self-insured. I'm not going to have an insurance company involved. I'm going to bear the risk of any claims that occur by my employees. And so that means it only has to comply with whatever the federal requirements are. So states can pass all sorts of mandates, as I mentioned, that dictate hearing aids and other treatments, but a large self-insured plan does not have to abide by those state laws.
It's not uncommon for families to find themselves in the middle of life and death situations, only to find out the life-saving drugs their child needed destroyed delicate hair cells necessary to hear. Drugs or surgery necessary to keep them alive also left them with significant hearing loss. Such was the case of 9-year-old Truman. After an incredible fight against a nasty cancer called osteosarcoma and an amputation below the right knee, Truman lost much of his hearing due to the toxic nature of the chemotherapy. Although insurance paid for the chemotherapy responsible for leaving him deaf, insurance deemed hearing aids were medically unnecessary. Sadie was 4 when she was diagnosed with a brain tumor. Sometime during the 12-hour surgery, her auditory nerve was severed. In addition to having to learn to walk again, Sadie's right eye was affected and she was deaf on her right side. Insurance wouldn't cover the hearing device she needed, so friends and family held a benefit rodeo to raise the money for it. The Children's Hearing Aid Project, a program of C.H.A.P, which is an agency providing programs for deaf and hard of hearing individuals, provides financial assistance for those working families providing private insurance that deny benefits for hearing aids. Many of these children have multiple disabilities and astronomical medical bills, which can leave a family financially and emotionally drained.
Every day I get calls from people, elderly people who are hard of hearing, or families who have a deaf or a hard of hearing child, and I do information and referral every day, all day, and it always saddens me when I don't have a good referral for a family who needs help with hearing aids for their child. If they don't qualify for Medicaid, then they're kind of stuck. If they're a working family that's working hard to make an income, but their insurance doesn't happen to cover hearing aids, they're really just stuck, and their child's education may be at risk. So I am thrilled to see the creation of the C.H.A.P program, the Children's Hearing Aid Project, where we can finally have something to give to these families that up till now we've kind of had to say, I'm sorry, there's not really a lot out there.
Creating strong, independent, and literate taxpayers for the 21st century is going to take the effort of our entire village.
We tell parents that, you know, it's not about the ears, it's about the brain, and the ears are just the way into the brain, and we have to keep those little ears stimulated, and so we tell them they have to read.
The language that we take in auditorily is very important in developing literacy skills. And all of those early book times and book sharing with mom and all that bonding that takes place is not only important for that relationship, but also building those early skills that we look for later with kids.
The Children's Hearing Aid Project was not designed to be a free program, but provides important financial help for those families in crisis who need it.
Everything started going through my mind, like, you know, what are we going to do now? We have a child who's in a critical situation, and now he's not going to be able to hear. If he does regain full ability, what is it going to be like for us to have a child that's not hearing?
The Children's Hearing Aid Project received initial seed money from the United Way's Venture Grant, the Kaiser Families Foundation, Williams Company, and matching grant money from Dr. Stan Lang, Dr. Jacque Scholl, retired Lieutenant Colonel Alan P. Scholl, and other private donors. Companies such as Oticon, Phonak, Widex, and Cochlear Americas have made it possible to purchase technology for this program at a reduced rate because of their commitment to children and organizations like C.H.A.P and C.H.A.P. Many of them are here tonight.
Well,
last year because of
The committee members of the first C.H.A.P fundraiser, Tulsa Hears A Who, have diligently and passionately worked to raise money and awareness for a new generation of deaf and hard of hearing children in Oklahoma. By reaching our goal for this event, we will be able to purchase 125 hearing aids. Your generous support will impact the future of Oklahoma, giving every child equal opportunity to reach their full potential. Thank you for joining us tonight and for being a part of the first annual Tulsa Hears A Who.